thrift flipping episode where I take things from the thrift store that I find and make them a little cuter. This time I'm gonna make them very extremely different. For today's thrift flip, I took an old men's t-shirt and turned it into a bucket hat. Very exciting, very cool, very thrift flipped. I love this one because it is, for one, super easy, and for two, you don't really need any specific things for this thrift flip because I'm pretty much just taking the fabric and making it into a hat. So you could pick a shirt, you could pick a pair of pants, anything at the thrift store that you like the fabric of. So this one's one that pretty much anyone can do as long as you have a sewing machine, which maybe you do, maybe you don't. Maybe you want to hand sew it. Maybe you're crazy. First off, when I went thrifting, I knew that I needed to pick something with a semi-firm fabric that wasn't super flimsy so that the hat would have a little bit of structure to it. So I decided on this men's, I don't know if it's a medium or large, but this men's t-shirt, and it honestly doesn't have to have a huge amount of fabric because the hat doesn't really take a ton of fabric to make. I think I used pretty much every bit of it from this shirt that I could though, so maybe like a men's t-shirt is the smallest you can go. Also, of course, make sure that you pick out something with a fabric that you love. I picked this one because, for one, I really love the like retro floral pattern of it. Two, this pattern doesn't really have a set direction, like it doesn't have directionality in the pattern, so I can pretty much take whatever parts and bits and pieces of the shirt I want and just throw them all together into a hat, and it wouldn't look all wonky and like the pattern was facing the wrong direction or like clashing with itself at all, if that makes any sense. Next up, what I did, which I highly recommend you guys do if you're going to do this thrift flip, is print out this pattern that I got from the Essentials Club video. I will link her video down below, and I will also link the printable pattern down below because that's where I got the idea for this thrift flip. So definitely go check out her video also. And this pattern made the thrift flip so much easier, even though I still did run into a few issues that I had to, like, you know, fix up a little bit. With that being said, make sure you watch this whole entire video before you try this thrift flip because I did make a few errors that I went back and corrected, so I just want to make sure that you guys see all my mistakes so that you don't make those mistakes, so we're all on the same page. So once I had all of these patterns printed, I chose to cut them out and then trace them onto my pieces of fabric. You can also pin the papers onto the fabric and cut it out that way, or you can just simply place the paper down and cut around it onto the fabric. But I found that tracing it onto the fabric was just easiest for me. Also, you'll see when you print out these patterns, but there's two different options for kind of a size that you'd want, and technically it's one size fits all, but I did choose the larger option because I had first made the smaller option, and I have a really small head, so before I made this video, I had made a different bucket hat from the same pattern, and I used the normal option, which is like the smaller option, and I have a very small head. I don't know why. I'm a little bit I don't want to talk about it. First, when I did the smaller option, the hat was like a little bit tight on me, so I figured if it's tight on me, even though it fits me, like if I made that again, it would be like super tight on someone else and like maybe not even fit. So I picked the larger choice. You should probably too. I also kind of like the look of like a baggier slash bigger bucket hat, so I like the larger option anyways on me. But instead of only cutting out the pieces that had the larger option, I also cut out the circle a tiny bit larger than it was because I didn't know why the circle would stay the same size if the other pieces were bigger. So I made the circle bigger too. This part was a big mistake and you'll see why later. And here my dog decided that I was no longer allowed to make my hat, and instead he had to sit in my lap and not allow me to do any more work. You gotta get up, buddy. Come on. Come on. Oh, good. Come on. Good job. Good job. Good job. No. After negotiating with him, he allowed me to move and take my shirt with me, but he himself would not move. Once I finished cutting out all the pattern pieces of my fabric, it was time to get out my handy dandy sewing machine. So the first thing that I had to sew was the two headband pieces together. I placed them with the good sides facing each other and then pinned them together on their skinny sides. Then I picked out a thread that matched the flowers and made my bobbin. If you are going to do this, I recommend making the bobbin quite large because you're going to need a lot of thread for this project. And then I started sewing. I first started sewing the headband pieces together with a straight stitch, but then I went back over when I was finished and did a zigzag stitch just to kind of secure it more together and make the hat a little bit more sturdy. Then it was time to pin the headband onto the circle piece that I had cut out, which will now be the top of the hat. This was sort of tricky for me to pin and like figure out how this seam worked, but you have to basically have the headband piece with the bad side on the outside and have the good side of both sides facing each other, like on the inside. Hopefully you can see better with the visual here. So now I have a confession to make. I messed up a very large amount. I noticed while I was pinning the circle to the headband piece that like something wasn't quite matching up, and I didn't really know what it was, but I figured out that the actual circle piece was too big for the headband piece. So since I had cut out the circle piece larger than I was supposed to, the circumference of the circle piece was larger than the circumference of the two headband pieces put together. But I decided to sew it up anyways and just have a lot of wrinkles, and I thought that would be okay, but it turns out it was not. So besides just having a few wrinkles in the top, it kind of looked like a puffy, awkward, like chef's cap that was like wonky on one side and just like it did not look good. Then I tried to seam rip these pieces apart, and I ended up just like tearing through the actual fabric with my seam ripper. I don't know if I was like being too eager, if I was being too aggressive with it, but something happened and I ended up just like seam ripping too hard. Then I decided it was probably best that I just start over, so I scrapped these two pieces. Sadly, I really did not want to start over. I don't like doing things twice. I barely like doing things once. So I recut, repinned, and then re-sewed these pieces together, and this time it worked. What I ended up changing was the size of the circle piece. I just cut it out exactly like it was in the pattern and tried to cut as evenly as I could around the fabric as well. So I cut out the original pattern instead of trying to make my own, and this time it went swimmingly. Or should I say sewingly? Okay. I also decided this time to iron out the circle piece after I cut it out because it was a little bit wrinkly, and I don't think I could have handled another malfunction of any kind, so I was not taking any chances. I decided to iron it out with my little mini hair straightener that I have for my bangs, which was a good option. Honestly, it worked perfectly. I recommend it. So after I sewed that section back together properly, it was time for the brim pieces to be put together. So the reason you have to cut out 4 of the brim pieces is because the brim is sort of double layered. So first I placed the pieces into pairs, and then I put them with the good sides facing. So the first one I laid down, the good side was facing up, and then the second one the good side was facing down so that they were facing each other, and then I pinned them along the longest side and then sewed along the longer side of each of the pairs. I continued to use a zigzag stitch throughout most of the rest of the project, just so you guys know, just because I feel like it made the hat feel more secure to me. I don't know if that's real or not, I think that just might be in my mind, but anyways. So once I had sewed these together, once I had sewed these together, I unfolded them and placed the first piece down with the good side facing up as flat as I could onto the table, and then I put the second piece with the good side facing down, like inside of that one, so that the good sides of the fabric were facing each other and all you could see on the outside was the bad sides of the fabric. Then I pinned them together like this on the short sides, making sure that I matched the seams up as much as I possibly could. Then I just sewed a zigzag stitch down both sides to attach them. At this point, I flipped the pieces inside out so that the good sides were showing on the outside, and you can sort of see the brim starting to come together a little bit and look like an actual brim now instead of like whatever that was looking like before. And I also decided to iron out the brim with my hair straightener so that the seams would lay flatter. Then I took the brim and started sewing lines about 1 centimeter apart all the way up the brim until about 1 inch was left with no lines. I switched back to a straight stitch here, and this is where you're going to use a lot of thread, so that's why I made the bobbin quite large. But even though I made the bobbin really big, it still ran out of thread before I was finished. So I ended up having to make another bobbin before I was done anyways, but maybe your bobbin will be big enough. Also, if you are thinking about doing this project, you could do any kind of stitch here that you want. Like, I think a zigzag stitch would have looked kind of cool, like give it a little more pizzazz. And I'm really glad that I decided to use blue thread that matched the flowers instead of white thread that matched the rest of the hat, because I feel like it just gives the hat a little bit more character to have like the blue lines showing. These lines though are technically for like the structure of the hat so that the brim stays up a little bit better and isn't as flimsy. And you can definitely tell once you do the lines that the brim has like a lot more structure to it. And using the thread that matched the flowers also kind of like hid some of my mistakes that I made. I'm also just out of white thread, so that's the real answer. Honestly, if I was to do this again, I probably would have spaced the lines out a little bit more on the hat and had a little bit less lines. I ended up with 8 here. I don't know, I feel like I would have liked it more with like maybe like 5 instead of 8, so just keep that in mind. But anyways, once I sewed these 8 lines, it was time to attach the brim to the cap. So I pinned the good sides of the cap and the good sides of the brim together, and it kind of made it look a little bit like a sailor's hat. So I decided to sew these 2 pieces together with a zigzag stitch. Sewing this section was a little bit tricky, so if you are gonna do this project, I recommend taking your time here and just making sure that you pin it out all evenly around the top and that your sewing is also even around the top. And that's all for the hat. Every time I finish a video, I literally say the same exact thing, but I literally love this hat so much. I made 2 of them, and I think that I like the flowered one more than just the plain white one, but I love them both so much. They're so cute, and this was like honestly so easy to do. I hope if you pick any of my thrift flips to try and do, you pick this one because it was simple and fun, and like the result comes out so clean looking. Like it really looks like just like you would buy it from the store. I don't know why I didn't put it on before, but this is the hat. I'm glad that I picked the fabric that I did as well. I think this is just like super cute, like super retro looking. I feel like you would find it at Urban Outfitters. I also made this matching scrunchie when I was done, which if you guys want, I can do like a little thrift flip slash like DIY on how to make scrunchies as well, because it's super easy and I feel like it's super cute to like if you have extra fabric from a shirt and you can like make a little matching like scrunchie situation. I wanted to show you guys the white one too because the white one is the first one I did and I made it a little bit smaller. I used the regular size section of the pattern and I love how this one turned out for me, like because my head is really small, so I think this one might be for me better than the other one. I don't know, I like both sizes because I feel like I like the baggy look and I also like it to fit me. Anyways, so that's all for this video, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed. I'm gonna be doing a lot more thrift flips in the future. I've got a room makeover video coming. It's taking me a long time, sorry, but I decided I'm going to start putting out a video every week, even if it's just like a short little clip. I just want you guys to have something from me every week. So I will see you guys next week this time. Bye. I always do that tongue thing. I always do that when I'm done. Yeehaw! Like, just the cutest hat ever. I love her. I love her. I made her. She's mine. Okay, this is weird.